Phoenix Down Radio is on the air. With your hosts,
Klaus Nightbringer,
Seyrr Kimono,
Chili,
and Luna Vox.
Welcome everybody to episode 44 of Phoenix Down Radio. How is everybody doing today?
Doing good. I have coffee, so we're good.
I got tea. Seyrr, what did you bring for the party?
generic Dayquil.
Woo! And Chili?
slightly sexist chocolate.
Sexist chocolate.
I don't know how to feel about that.
There used to be an advert for this chocolate bar where it's a woman would try and purchase it and they wouldn't be allowed to be sold it because it's just for men. And then they would dress up as a man and then they would be able to buy it.
Does it have testosterone in it?
My goodness.
How would that work? Is this chocolate that can only be consumed through the penis?
Wow. Wow.
Oh, don't
Literally
start.
drinking it right as you said that. Oh my god. I've
because
never
of the-
smelled whipped cream so much.
Lovely.
And because of the outcry over the adverts that they did, they then, a few weeks later, released a pink version.
Nice.
That's even worse!
So as you could hear, we do have at least one guest joining us. That was the lovely dulcet tones of Ethys Asher. Thanks again for coming, Ethys.
Hello, everybody. And anytime. I tell you, anytime.
And
Woo, more accents on the show.
yes, well, we got Chili, and then we've got now Ethys. And I don't know if he has quite an accent, but he has quite a brain on him. We have AnonyMoose. Thank you for joining us.
How's it going? Anytime. And I lack an accent. I'm sorry.
Well, it's
Kinda
not
has an accent.
it's not
just
the
a little
sexy Australian accent.
No. You guys are the ones with the accents. I don't know what you're talking about.
It's all perspective.
Okay. I have to ask this. I'm not trying to be racist or anything, but Ethys, does Chili have an accent to you?
What?
Or
I mean, that's an interesting question because
Ethys
British
have
and
an
Australian
accent to
are
you?
quite... Yeah, do I have an accent to you, Chili?
You do a bit to me.
Yeah, but Australian and British are a lot closer than
It's
you know,
a legit
either of us with
question.
American.
If I have them both here, I have to ask it. I'm never
Oh
going to get this chance to have an Aussie and a Brit in the same moment.
Did you just call me an Aussie?
Yes, I did.
You know that's
Are
a slur, right?
I'm sorry.
I'm kidding, it's not.
Oh, damn. Oh, all right. Well, that was lovely.
I'm just going to go sit in the corner.
Well, it's
Don't
all
worry,
right.
that's what I've had to do for most of the podcast.
Well, let's go ahead and talk a little show news. We've had a couple of special episodes since our last regular episode. I hope you guys were able to check those out when the Revolutions video dropped, as well as the live letter from this past week. So go check those out on the website, phoenixdownradio.com. But other than that, Luna hates me. Luna hates me.
There's so much salt happening right now with
Is it
him.
because you called her your daddy?
No.
That's a yucky word.
We just cleaned the carpets! Why are you doing that?
Because Chili's
Daddy.
paying for it this time.
Oh,
That's such a bad word. That's such a gross word.
So if you weren't aware, there was a Duty Commenced and a Culling Time episode that happened Thursday and Friday. I missed the Culling
Klaus,
Time.
Tell us about it. Tell us what happened.
I missed Culling Time, but I was able to make it to the episode of Duty Commenced, and they basically covered the live letter. Did a good time. Shannon and Matt were awesome as always, and they gave away 5 Mysidian rabbit plushies. And I won one.
I didn't know this was the thing, and I hate you more now.
now you can
Freaking
now you can cosplay a really terrible ninja.
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
I can cosplay Scarlet.
No, you literally... no, this is what you can do. You're already a really terrible ninja with your, what's his face?
Diabell.
Naruto
Oh, with
Sensei
Kakashi?
dude. Yeah, you can just throw the bunny at everyone. There you go.
Oh my goodness.
Wait. The bunny's supposed to mean you're a bad ninja. I thought that was like some sort of certificate for doing well.
You thought you were doing good, huh?
Yeah, and I thought, oh my god, look, I've got a cute bunny in my head.
They are adorable, and I can't wait to get it.
I swear to God, Klaus, you're the person that I know who wins all the contests.
Yeah, well, I shouldn't tell you that.
There's something about you. Like, how many contests this past year, since the years began, how many have you won? Like 5 or 6?
Well, let's just put it this way,
like this
Luna.
trend.
Just yesterday, like I said, I at the end of the day, I won that bunny. But during the day, I went to go see Guardians of the Galaxy using a ticket I won on a contest on Facebook for the local theater. And then I went to have a pizza that I won on a contest from Facebook to have pizza. So, yeah.
Exactly.
That was just yesterday.
This is not the worst business model I've heard.
And not to mention, since I've known you, you've called into the local radio. Well, it's not local. It's like Minnesota's rock station.
Yeah.
And you've won like 5 pairs of tickets off of them separate times.
Yeah.
And you are one of the luckiest sons of bitches that I know.
That, and there was the Your Name contest from
oh my God.
From Pocky. That was a thing too.
Yeah, he won that. He's
well, congratulations! You won the event for Fantasy 14.
Well, I'm hoping that no, Nick Nard did not buy a Powerball ticket because every time I try and do those, I never win. But
cactpots at least, right?
I've never won a cactpot. The best I've ever done was I got 30K on a. I did get 3 10Ks once, but that was a long ass time ago.
I find it kind of sad that the amount I've won on mini cactpot beats the amount I've won on jumbo cactpot by a factor of at least 10, if not 100.
I'll buy a jumbo cactpot and then forget it exists for about a month, and then I'll remember it, and then cash my ticket in, and then realise I can't do that, and then buy another one, then forget for another month.
Yeah.
I can identify at least 3 flaws in this process.
Well, you remember to go cash in your ticket after the show tonight, all right?
I didn't buy one this month.
Well, go buy one and then go cash it in next week.
You've got like 22 minutes.
Well, okay, never mind. Don't go buy one. Stay here. Anyway, speaking of things that we hope to win, the Heaven's Dub contest just ended yesterday, and we, as a group, put in 2 different entries. Luna did an awesome entry called the Valley Girl of Light. And Seyrr and I did an entry with one of our free company mates called How Not to Pick Up Women in Eorzea.
I really think we could have found a better title.
I asked for help, and it's like... I had nothing.
And I sat here crying because I can't be in any of them.
Sorry.
That's what you get for being not in North America.
Right?
That's what you get.
But there were like 40 entries or so in the comedic entries, and then there was about 60 in the serious entries. So in about 2 weeks, they're supposed to be announcing those winners. So I'm actually looking forward to that.
Yeah, 20 prizes on each side, so I feel like we've got a decent shot, even if it's random.
Mm-hmm. So, like I said, all of the entries are linked out at the Lodestone forum post where that's at, so you can go check out all of the different entries. You can check out Luna's and ours as well if you'd like. We're not going to play it on the show until we've discovered that they're the awesomest winning ones. So
yeah,
jinx it.
So definitely go out to the place and the thing and click the thing and the stuff and the other stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Speaking of other things in the community, the Make It Rain campaign was announced. Starts on Monday and runs through June 12th. Apparently,
2 weeks.
Yep, there's going to be a new hairstyle that you can buy, as well as a new Senor Sabatender furnishing, and a bunch of new Triple Triad cards, and a number of the glamour pieces will be reduced price.
I am so happy. I had seen those Triple Triad cards in the listings that players had made. My list had been incomplete for a really long time. I finally get to finish it off.
Woohoo!
Well, that and the tournament cards, but that's going to be a miracle at this point.
Yeah, tournaments are tough.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to find players sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Race some chocobos. Do some fun
I still haven't won a single match.
Not
Chocobo
one?
racing?
of a triple triad.
Are you doing it against people or are you doing it against NPCs?
Both.
You need better cards than that.
Yeah.
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 I've only tried it once since it came out, so.
Well, then that would be
Okay.
probably why.
I mean, you're technically correct, but not usefully correct.
Yes. That's a very bad sample size, Chili. Come on.
Yeah.
And
By the way, I was confused for a second there because it starts Tuesday in the UK.
yeah, well, we're going Monday. We're going by Pacific time here because we're in the USA. USA.
USA.
What is that in Australian time, Ethys?
I'm pretty sure that would be Tuesday.
I suppose because you're across the international date line.
Yeah,
Future
we're
people.
17.
Future
I mean, I'm in
people.
LA at the moment, but yeah, in Australia
It'd
we're
be
about 17 hours ahead of
3
you guys.
PM, wouldn't it?
Yeah, sounds about right.
Okay. And they did confirm on the Duty Commence that there will be an MGP bonus for games and gates. So that wasn't announced in the actual posting that they had, but like I said, Matt did announce it on Duty Commenced. So you heard it there.
Get your Cloud triple triad cards like you've all been waiting for.
I could
my
actually do
favorite
that. I'm
amount.
sitting on 2 million MGP right now.
Oh my god.
What?
Yeah,
Why?
because
He just sits on it waiting for like hatch.
I've already got Fenrir.
Have you got the chair?
Not yet. I've got everything else.
Get the chair.
I've
Get
got
the chair.
Get the chair.
Well, I'm going to be getting the chair,
the bad
but
balance.
I wanted to see what
Get the
else
chair.
comes. I was
Yeah.
going to wait until after Stormblood drops. I
Chair.
wanted to see what else was coming out. God.
Nothing for the freaking gold saucer. They don't give a crap about that shit anymore.
All right. Speaking of things that people don't
Chair.
give a crap about, there's going to be a 14 days of FFXIV on Twitter.
Whoa! Whoa! Triggered!
Shade.
Triggered!
Shade thrown.
That looks amazing.
No,
I'm
it-
offended.
It does look amazing. I was actually just me being a sarcastic bastard. So June
Get a
1st
chair.
through the 14th, there'll be different things that you can post out on Twitter. For instance, first day is going to be your favorite place to fly on a mount, favorite scenery shot, favorite NPC, blah, 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 blah. Everything is listed out on the lodestone. So, take the screenshots and post them out on your Twitter account. Mark them with hashtag XIV14days. And
It does look like this one doesn't have any particular prize or anything, so it sounds like it's more for fun, build up excitement in the community.
yep, it's a
sort of
community
thing.
builder, definitely. But it's going to be fun. I'm interested to see what we come up with.
I'm really excited to see everyone's shots. I'm a screenshot junkie, so
I have 100 gig worth of screenshots and videos on my PS4.
duh.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's
On your external or what?
That is on the internal.
What do you have for in there? You got what, 2 terabyte?
No, I know about 300 meg for game. Everything else is Final Fantasy 14 pictures.
Oh my god.
So you still have just a straight 500 gigabyte drive in
Yeah.
there?
Yeah.
Chili, you need to upgrade, dude. Get on my level, bro.
Jesus. But no, speaking of someone who's a screenshot junkie, I can't remember how much they said they have, but Sonoma from Blue Garter,
Oh God. Sonoma,
Screenshots.
we love you, Sonoma, but you are a screenshot whore.
but we love you for it.
Yes. I mean, we see.
Your
I mean,
Twitter feed is kind of amazing.
yeah. If you don't follow Sonoma on Twitter, you must do that. At
Sonoma, next time we're in Vegas,
2
we
A's
have to get drinks
BG.
together.
So that's amazing stuff. Go follow them. They're awesome.
How I miss FanFest.
Right? I miss
Right.
I miss the sushi night. I miss hanging out with all
Like,
you guys.
Oh my god! Like,
Why do we
I
keep
was gonna
going back to
tell you,
this?
You remember, right? I was going to tell you, Klaus, when we were driving back from FanFest, how we knew we were close to home is when we saw a Caribou Coffee and a bagel place. Well, they opened one, like, down, like, 15 miles where I was grocery shopping.
We're getting
So
one
I
here in
went there.
Hutch.
A Caribou and a bagel place?
Yes.
Ooh, about time.
Right?
Hutch
Oh, man.
has barely any...
Center
Like-
of culture right there.
Exactly.
Right?
Hey, come on. Einstein bagels are amazing.
They are. I had a, what did I have? the salmon
It's so good.
Lux and Nox and Lux and something. Yeah. Anyways,
so speaking of FanFest, this is something that we have been wanting to do since FanFest. Since we met...
That was a really weak segue.
Hey,
it worked. Shut up.
thank you, Luna. Come on. I work with what I'm given here. Come on. And you guys don't give me much.
Ow.
Wow.
Slap in face. After I stood up for you and everything.
I'm talking to Seyrr, not you, Luna.
Oh,
Hang
okay.
on.
Yeah, fuck you, sir.
Drafting a petition. Drafting a petition to add /throw shade to the game.
On change.org?
Oh man, that's totally an effective place to accomplish things.
Right? Anyway, getting back to what I was saying, this is something that we've wanted to do since FanFest. Since they announced the lore books were coming out, that's been something that we've really enjoyed on this show. And as a part of the community, it's really been one of the coolest things about it is the people who are going out and digging for the information behind what's happening within the game. And we've got a chance right now with Seyrr, with Ethys, and with Moose to discuss some of this really cool stuff that really builds this game that we all enjoy playing. And what we're going to talk about today on this lore special is the history of the 5th Astral Era. Luna, do you want to tell the story about how this kind of started?
Sure. So this kind of started because, what were we running? We were running Weeping City, and I noticed a very familiar name in my party, and I'm like, hey, are you AnonyMoose? You have to be AnonyMoose. I follow you on Twitter. And I got no response back.
Oh, yeah, this is a bad example. I got yelled at.
Just ignore it.
And so I'm like, hey, so I co-host a podcast we had Fusion on before. Hope you're doing good. And still no response.
You know that healer that gets accused of just kind of autopiling it and watching Netflix?
You don't.
No, that's not quite that far. I was having a discussion with an FC member on Discord and barely paying attention to the run, aside from just making sure I was healing and DPSing properly. And when they said hi,
healing, you were on Summoner.
Was I? Oh.
Yes, you were. I was the one healing.
Let's just say I was making sure my rotation was right.
Technically, as Summoner, you could be healing.
I am so bad at that job
too. But
so not only was I probably terrible at that job, I wasn't paying attention to who I was in the party with. And as I'm leaving the party, I'm like, Luna, I know that name. Why do I know that name? And then I get a message in the content creators channel like, yeah, thanks for saying hi to me.
And so basically I'm like, you can make it up to me by telling me the complete history of the Shadows of Mhach. And thus far, we got a hold of Ethys. We told Seyrr we want to do this, and yeah, so now we're here.
We decided to expand it to not just be the Shadows of Mhach, but kind of include the Amdapor and the Nimians as well. So we're going to try and talk as much about the entire 5th Astral as we can in the time constraints that we have.
This was a really ill-defined research question, so we just kind of ran with it where we felt like.
Yep. So we're going to...
And because of that, there is now 10 pages of notes in the Google Doc.
Yes.
So
See, I thought I had it made because someone came into the forums requesting a full Shadows Mhach rundown. And I was like, oh, I've got everything right here. I already did it. And then I pop into the Google Doc and it's the whole Astral Era rather than the raid. I'm like, uh-oh.
Bit of overkill.
easy.
All right, so I'm going to let these fine gentlemen take over, and we're kind of going to listen and interject with maybe some questions that we have. So, Seyrr, I'm going to let you take over this one, buddy.
So, guys, grab your popcorn, grab your drink, hold on to your butts. It's lore time.
Story time.
Daddy, teach us.
Oh god, now I don't want to.
Senpai Seyrr, teach us, Senpai Seyrr.
Okay, so yeah, we decided to talk about... So the question was about the Shadows of Mhach, and then that turned into, okay, the War of the Magi and how this whole thing came to be. And really that doesn't make sense without the context of the history that surrounded it, and it eventually became a complete history of the 5th Astral Era. So yeah, a little bit of mission creep there. just for setting the stage on that. And definitely feel free to jump in because I'm still recovering from a cold. I cannot talk out this entire thing. But it starts off actually with the ending of the fourth Umbral era, which was the Age of Endless Frost. It was the Calamity of Ice, this huge global ice age, where most of the population moved to the southern parts of Eorzea, had frozen to death, or both. This was also a time when the Mikote population that had been banished by the Allagans during the Third Astral made their return to Eorzea by migrating over the frozen seas. At that point, yes.
Why were they banished by the people and the things?
Allagans be hella racist is the short version.
Oh, okay. So, no, I'm not going to go there. I'm going to give people...
So the Allagans, who are they?
Oh, God.
We don't need to open up another can of worms. Come on.
They were a Third Astral Era major power.
I think we know who the Allagans are.
I was kidding.
Yes.
We know because all the tombstones have left us.
Yes. They're very tasty.
I can't wait for this part to get fleshed out because in 1.0 these, or no, actually early 2.0 they had little tooltips at the bottom of the screen that would give you hints when it was loading, and they had a tooltip that the Mikote came across the sea in the fifth Umbral from Mericidia, and that got disseminated everywhere. And then that tooltip got deleted. It was never put in the game. And now the lore book says they came from Ilzabard. And basically all of the Mikote who follow the lore are like, wait, no, come back, my background.
I mean, Miss Mericidia makes some amount of sense. It's kind of the more tropical-ish jungle environment. It kind of fits the hunter style that the Mikote have. So I don't know if they just wanted to make it hey, no, Mericidia needs to be sealed off because they are really, really mad at the Allagans still, millennia later.
I think it's partly because we realized the distance between Eorzea and Mericidia is such that could not be walked over.
Yeah, well, I mean, if it's a migration, this was going to happen over a long period. If the seas are staying that frozen, you maybe have encampments that are on the ice for a long period.
Oh, of course, but it makes a lot more sense to be coming from Ilzabard.
Yeah. Also, having an ocean freeze that deep means that there should be a lot more life wiped out.
Yeah, that would be literally like the Pacific Ocean freezing over for 100 years.
Yeah, that doesn't end well.
A little bit of trouble.
Yeah.
All right, so this is the setting where we have the start of the fifth Astral Era. One of the notable events we know of at the start is the Sanctum of the 12 being built in what's going to eventually become the East Shroud. And at this time, people are begging the gods for help surviving in what is still a very cold and harsh climate, and they develop religious rituals that begin harnessing the power of the 12 in the form of magic. Now, as temperatures begin to rise, the people do begin to spread out over Eorzea again. You get a whole bunch of new communities that are starting to form, and this actually became a point of discussion in the notes. As those communities began to thrive and as unique cultures began to arise, they actually chose different patron gods to assert their individual identities. It's not a matter of, they chose gods and then their culture developed from that. It's more, as they started to develop a culture, they associated themselves with the appropriate god. I do have questions about if maybe the gods' identities were changed or developed over this time to fit what the culture's identities were, kind of a which one came first sort of thing. But so at the start of the fifth Astral, we have this group starting to diverge off into these multiple ones, eventually ending up with about 12, possibly 13. There was a line in the lore book that's unclear, but several different communities that each eventually focuses on worship of a different god. We know that a group of here who are focusing on worshiping Nofika eventually arrive in an area that's eventually the South Shroud. Much, much later is around where we are now, here at Camp Tranquil. And at that time, it's a whole bunch of open plains, lots of large rock outcroppings, and it's this really good natural supply of rock that allows them to, over time, build very sturdy structures that are going to endure a lot, and that's going to eventually become the city of Amdapor.
Yay.
Now, over the next couple centuries, you do have the first cities appear, starting around 300 years into the Astral Era is when you start to see them. And starting around then and continuing over the next 2.5 centuries or so, you get about 12 distinct city-states, each one paying homage to a different member of the 12. At this time, Amdapor becomes the dominant power on the continent, but you have a lot of war between the city-states, all sorts of skirmishes. Oh, question.
Do we know why it was Amdapor that decided to, or that kind of rose into the predominant position at this point?
Not really. I mean, we could guess that, again, the access to a lot of that rock may have helped them in building, for instance, defensive fortifications, other structures. It was easier to build longer-lasting stuff, and that may have helped them with... Like, once you have more stable buildings, once you don't have to devote as much energy to that, you can devote it to other things. But
so maybe they were devoting that to the study, being able to draw Aether from the world itself, and maybe this particular area might have been more rich with Aether or easier to access that?
It's a possibility, but we don't have a lot of supporting evidence at this point. There was development of basic magic happening all over the place, but it was kind of... There's nothing that we have that says it was especially strong at this point.
Okay.
We really just don't have a lot. Oh, go for it.
If I was to shoot from the hip about why Amdapor rose around that time to become a dominant power, it would be kind of just a mix of a few auspicious factors. Like, they already at that time have Soulkin in use. They're using it to build. They're not using them for war quite yet. But they're also kind of in the center of the continent, and they're among one of the fastest developing cities. Like, Amdapor starts becoming a dominant power like 200 years before Mhach is even founded. So a lot of things they kind of have in their favor early on.
Okay, so a lot of it was just timing, potentially.
Like, they might have just been lucky ending up in a place that was a good place to support a city, because you had these other communities that weren't necessarily established as cities.
Okay. Now, just there. Go ahead. Sorry.
Plus, if they're in the center, I mean, that probably puts them in a good position for trade, right? Like, Ul'dah is a very powerful, prosperous nation, but if it didn't have that geographical locale, it wouldn't have that at all. It wouldn't be very useful.
Well, and the fact that they had these pre-built roads from the Allegan era.
Right.
So that really helps. Anyway, what I was going to say, I wanted to throw this out real quick before we get too deep into this. Everything that we're talking about here is speculative. None of this is official FFXIV Square Enix canon. So, don't take everything we're saying, as gospel, but, there's probably a lot of truth in it.
A lot of it is drawn from the lore books. There's also given the conditions we know about, what's a reasonable guess. We have seen that that the actual lore team tries to keep stuff reasonably consistent and believable. So,
I just wanted to make sure.
On a point we were just hitting there, most with the Soulkin, do you think that the Amdapor were using Soulkin as like heavy machinery in construction of the city?
I mean,
are you talking like the magic pots and things like that?
The pots came later. I'm trying to think of what they could have, because it's rudimentary golem technology early on, and I don't know kind of what you would use them for at the time, because we always see them used as tools of war and as sentries, and especially as sentries. But I mean, if you can program them to be sentries, you can probably program them to pick up a rock, right?
Like, you have them as in place of like the heavy lifters and excavating tools we use.
Yeah, I wouldn't close the door on that possibility.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we had any precedent for that.
Quick reminder for those who don't recognize the term, Soulkin is a term for used by Orisians for living things, quote-unquote living things, usually like rock, other things like that are animated with a magical force, where they believe that
golems, effectively.
This inanimate object that has been somehow imbued with a soul, when it may just be simple magical control techniques or whatever, and is walking around apparently independently.
Cool.
Right. So We know that the other cities, do emerge over that time, though we don't have a whole lot of information about it. We know that by around 500 years into the 5th Astral Era, Mhach had been founded, though we don't really know a lot of details about it. We also know around then that Lalafell sailors arrive on the shores of Vildbrand.
Ew.
Yeah, and they're just coming in very simple reed boats, but they arrive on the shores of Vildbrand, and they establish a mercantile outpost that will become the city-state of Nim. And although Nim is a lot smaller than the other states, it does end up becoming a major commerce center, in large part due to the skill of its sailors and traders.
Mm-hmm. So they originally wanted to establish trade with the kobolds, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And they found a sort of common thread in that the Nimians were worshipping Ocean, well, the Lalafell that became the Nimians were worshipping Ocean, which is not dissimilar to the kobold sort of religion and mythology in worshipping the Mount Gomero as their mother, effectively.
Yep. Oshan was the one who, in a lot of the Eorzean creation myths, was responsible for the creation of mountains and wandered among them. So definitely... Mm-hmm. Almost certainly a common ground there that they were able to build on. I would also not be surprised if they did eventually establish trade routes out to the west, where we have the Mamulja and others coming from, but we don't have a lot of data on that.
Well, they're all about the same size, too.
You mean the Lalafells and the kobolds?
Yes.
Yeah, obligatory short joke.
Yes. They said it make the joke about the reeds and potatoes and making their own boats out of themselves, but moving on.
The Great Mole Potato War.
Yes.
Terrible.
My grandpa died in those wars.
Boiled or mashed?
Stuck in a stew.
So not much happens for about 3 centuries, at least not much that records survive up to the present day. Skirmishes, various push back and forth between the various nations. It seems like Amdapor was on, while they might have been the dominant power, they didn't seem to have a very expansionist bent. Given that they did have that early advantage, they seemed to be content to mostly stay where they were and not worry about taking over their neighbors too much, at least from what we know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's good, I guess.
So, jump about 300 years or so to around the year 800, where the Mhach sorceress Shatoto develops black magic.
Did you go, oh!
Quite possibly. Now, before this, all the forms in magic that were in use would draw upon the caster's ether, which limited its power. Black magic, as black mages who have done the quest and didn't skip all their cutscenes know, it allows a caster to make use of ether in the environment. And that leads to this very substantial increase in strength and allows Mhach to become a major military power.
So it comes down to the invention of the Gem of Shotaro, I believe, which is what we use as our job crystal, right?
Yep.
That it sort of filters ambient ether for us. I've always thought that it's really kind of ironic that we've gone backwards in terms of black magic into thaumaturgy. In the thaumaturgy is distinct from conjury, as far as I understand it. In that you're channeling your body's ether rather than ambient ether. And we get a lot of instances in the post-50 Black Mage quests where people are trying to use sort of more powerful black magics without the Gem of Shotaro or some other sort of mediating tool, and they're literally setting themselves on fire, like they're destroying their bodies through doing it.
Yep, they tip the balance of their body's ether, gets aspected to one thing. I mean, it seems like the general thaumaturge battle mechanic can be sort of seen as this expression of, hey, you're messing around with your body's ether, turning to this thing where it regenerates more of it, but you are playing around with that balance.
Mm-hmm. So I guess the Gem of Shotaro, I think a useful way to think about it is in the same terms as like the Tupsamati or a Dragon's Eye. It's effectively an ethereal battery which sort of absorbs ambient ether, and you can use it to channel into more powerful magics. So that was the turning point, basically, for the Mhach, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Especially because they must have figured out how to mass produce it.
Maybe they just
I mean,
could
at the-
slot
at
a
the
lot of
very
pie.
least, to a focus.
Did they mass produce Gems of Shotaro?
Well, they can't have had just one or two powering that big of an army.
I'm telling you,
Like,
they
they
all
were able
slotted
to-
pie, man.
Well, they could have used other foci, right?
Right. Okay, maybe not specifically the Gem of Shotaro, but they, like, given that we haven't seen a thing that does... I am totally jumping back and forth now as I'm thinking about this, because we do have the others who use black magic in the quest, don't they? Like, there are some who are using it more... I need to go look through some of those dialogue logs at some point. Project for another time. But whatever the specifics of it, Mhach has become this major military power. And so over the next century or so, as Mhach starts taking on this very expansionist foreign policy, conquering its neighbors, expanding its territory, Amdapor begins developing white magic that focuses around purification, protection, and healing. They're, again, not seeming to be as concerned about expanding their territory, but looking for something that's kind of this direct counter to Mhach's power. And they create a lot of wards using white magic, including the animated stone statues that we fight in Lost City of Amdapor and Lost City of Amdapor Hard, a lot of those other ones. I remember it was pointed out in something that Koji posted about how you have these white magic statues that have the same appearance as demons, and but they're run completely using white magic, and it's not they are evil like counterparts. It's just this is the style that was in vogue for that reason.
Right, so you're referring to the demon walls.
Say again?
You're referring to the demon walls there.
Yeah, demon walls, a couple of those other, like, there are the gargoyle-type statues as well that you fight in Amdapor Keep.
Yeah, that's true.
The Vodarigas towards the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they are, like, specifically modeled to look like Voidsen, aren't they?
Right.
Yep.
It's similar to how you would put a gargoyle on, say, the roof of a church. So there are actual Vodariga, and then there are things inspired by how grotesque they look that are technically Soulkin.
Yep. So same appearance, but very different forces animating them. We
So
smash them
among
apart
the-
either way.
Among all the Soulkin, we've got things like the magic pots, right? Now, I don't know if this is ever really made super explicit, but I've always wondered, and it seemed to me, that they're using a lot of these Soulkin as sort of means of storing ether. In the same way that you'd store it in like a crystal or a stone or something like that. What do you guys think of that? What do you think of the magic pots?
That is a good question.
Are we talking
Yeah, like,
specifically the ones we find in, say, the Lost City?
Sure.
Because Amdapor was known for a while for creating like really elaborate statues, and the magic idol and the magic pot are just kind of ported in from 11. So they came up with the really flimsy excuse of like, well, by the end of the war, they didn't have time to create these big, elaborate statues. So they made very simple statues, and they just
making practical ones, yeah.
something that can punch and something that can like bowl things over, and like the magic pot just kind of swings around and knocks everything around it over. So I'm not.
Raffle Dragoon in chat saying magic pots were brought over by Shantoto during her first accidental dimensional warp to Eorzea. You might not be wrong.
And we're going to have to kill them for hours to get the spring water to get the first part of our Kieran pop.
I just know that the Amdapori were kind of keeping close tabs on what the Mhach were developing, right? And they're saying, all right, how do we make versions of that kind of stuff that's like not shitty or not destructive, or how can we counter that or whatever? So when the Mhach started using Void Scent as literal ethereal batteries, at that point, I sort of look at the magic pots and I'm like, maybe the Amdapori are doing something similar here, and they're like pouring ether into these golems for use later for other things.
That's
I wonder if you can. I wonder if you can tap them.
Yeah, I'm sure you could.
If they weren't trying to attack us, we might have time to research that.
They were trying to mull over the possibilities of Soulkin in my head, because when you create a soul stone, can you add more ether to that soul stone later, or is it in the creation I mean, the
I
relic
think
quest
so.
is kind of...
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. The anima kind of sets a precedent for a soul stone, which you can keep adding
to
more and more ether to.
Right,
Yeah.
it's a tacit connection, but it's one that definitely works as a precedent for assuming that you could keep powering up and then further maybe later tapping a soulkin.
You know, is it
Or maybe
possible?
have it drawing power from its environment, like a solar cell kind of thing.
Maybe that's what the big thing on top is. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
Or, you know, did anybody see a USB port on the side of that thing?
The problem with I guess designing some kind of soulkin that would constantly draw in ambient ether is then you come to the same problem that you have with the void set with the primals. That's like exactly why they're not good tools to use, and that's why they're dangerous, and that's why they're harmful.
Right. Oh no, you guys have killed Luna.
Although we do know that the Amdapor were sort of constantly drawing ambient ether to, you know, develop and prop up and fortify their city, and that it was causing a great deal of damage to the surrounding land, right?
Right.
So I guess they didn't really care about that all that much.
So can we
At the end of the war, they didn't have anything to tap. They really tapped the land dry.
Yeah.
I mean, really, we kind of just need to go in there and get some fragments of the parts and bring them over to a researcher. That's the thing. Like, if I were actually directly controlling my character, I would be grabbing so many more things for recovery and research.
Yeah, you're not
There's
wrong.
There's so many moments like that, aren't they? Where you're like, I'm sorry, why am I giving you these timestamps? Can I read these, please?
Yeah.
Seriously.
Can I interject a question here? I just want to kind of ask a question to kind of differentiate for not only myself, but for everybody watching and listening on the podcast. You know, you guys are talking about Soulkin, and then we've got the Void Scent. Now, can you kind of differentiate how those are different? Like, the Soulkin, those are from created soul stones, correct?
Yeah, they're artificial.
So,
whereas the Void Scent come from the Void itself?
So yeah, actually, if we jump to the next point on the timeline that talks about the introduction of void magics, then we can get a little more into the specifics.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move to about 1,000 years into the Fifth Astral. At this point, we know that 6 of the original 12 city-states are left. We know that Mhach, Amdapor, and Nim remain. We don't really know anything about the other, and it's just at this point that there are 6 of them left. The other 6 have been destroyed or absorbed into other city-states.
Or Ozma?
The reason, probably not at this point, because this
I think Ozma comes a little bit later.
I'm kidding. You just said absorbed,
no, legit question, but also at this point, the land is visibly starting to suffer from the increased use of ether to power the various forms of magic that are being used. But this is also around the time that Mhach, already doing fairly well with its black magic, but meeting resistance from Amdapor, begins researching void magic, which is the summoning and manipulation of creatures from realms beyond. Now, they apparently had learned something from what happened to Alag, because a lot of their research does focus on building in these protections that will prevent the summoned void scent from being able to act against what their masters want them to do. That one staff, the Null Stone, that is a big part of the Weeping City of Mhach, its retrieval, is one of those protections. Since you were asking, with Void Scent, the idea is that you do have this other realm, the Void, which we later learn interesting facts about, not in the scope of this at the moment, but it is inhabited by all sorts of weird and interesting creatures, and various magics can tear very small tears to the Void. Creatures that are much weaker on the Void Scent hierarchy, like imps and the like, they can actually come directly through the tears. But more powerful, larger creatures, they require some kind of body to be formed for them, out of ether, out of other material, but some type of body to be formed that they will then inhabit. This was one of the big things where the Cloud of Darkness could not directly come through the hole, but was making a deal with Zandy in order to create a hole large enough and to create a vessel such that they could enter this realm and then drink up its ether.
Mm-hmm. So that's one of the most important things to note about the Void Scent, I think, is because where they're coming from is devoid of ether. That's why it's called the Void. That the creatures that are surviving there have sort of done so by basically feeding on each other. And they want to get into our realm because there is ether in our realm. They can feed themselves, they can sustain themselves, they can become more powerful. So effectively, when they're in our realm, they behave in very much the same way as primals in a metaphysical sense. What I've always wondered, though, is because we learned, not long ago what the Void actually was, in that it was once, a world like our own that got tipped too far to darkness, and Igaeorm fucked up, basically.
Right.
And all the ether was drained out of it, which is no good for anybody. I've always wondered whether Alec and or the Mhach actually knew what the Void Scent actually were, or whether they had this same sort of mythology that most Eorzeans have, that they're just like demons from another dimension.
They were probably just promised power, for if they would allow them to quote unquote help them get into our realm. So I don't.
You managed to make contact with this alternate dimension. There's stuff there that is very, very happy to talk with you. So that is a good question, whether they even actually had the chance to start researching that, though I'm sure they were curious.
I think you can swing either way, because, it's been thousands of years since Heidelin has chosen a champion rather than just warriors. It's been a long time. And we get the information about the division of the world from her through Minfilia. And the only other source for it is the Gerun oracles, or Gerun, I don't know how it's pronounced.
Yeah.
Which no one takes seriously anymore anyway.
So, you have to wonder if during those eras there are similar writings, and if so, are they taken seriously? Are they disseminated? But I think until there's like a precedent for that, I'm just assuming that they didn't know yet.
Yeah. Until we have reason to believe it, it seems like a bit of a jump.
Cool.
To go back to a question that you were asking earlier, the difference between Void Scent and Soulkin. A Void Scent is an essence from that other world that was once a living thing. So it is kind of a soul, or what is left over from a soul, whereas a Soulkin is more of a pseudo-soul, ironically, since it bears the name, that you've created magically with something else. Even an Ascian is capable of making one. If you remember very early on in the story, he makes a golem using whatever his essence is and calls that forward. And it's the only golem in the game that has like a nail in its back.
Right. The usual thing that I like to go for is thinking of a Soulkin as being like kind of the magical equivalent of an artificial intelligence.
Yeah. I think that's a reasonable way to put it.
Or parallel.
So that's around 1000 is when we start having the void magic be researched, and we continue to have buildup of magical technology, skirmishes between various nations. All this continues to build up until around 1250 in the 5th Astral Era. And there's it's not clear exactly what happened, but I like to compare it to World War I, where very technically what happened is Archduke Franz Ferdinand gets assassinated. This causes a chain of events that ends up embroiling all the various nations of Europe in this big, huge war. Like, technically, that's what happened. Really? Europe was such a mishmash of alliances and tensions and buildup going on that if Franz Ferdinand hadn't been assassinated, almost certainly something else eventually would have triggered it. The place was a powder keg just waiting for a spark.
So you think it's a case of the straw that broke the camel's back?
Something like that.
Right, when you have 200 years of like political and military posturing going on, anything can be the thing that's remembered for setting it off, but it could be anything.
And if there was Ascian influence, I would definitely expect that they would get in the way of anything that might lead to a cooling of those tempers.
Ascian started World War I confirmed?
Sure.
And every other one.
Hey, I think further down in the notes I made a reasonable speculative argument for them being responsible for the Cold War.
I've already put in the Twitch chat that by the sound of things, mages caused global warming.
The Asians claim that they were responsible for. They take credit for 7 calamities now. So even though we don't have any direct evidence of them in the build-up to the War of the Magi, I think it's a safe assumption, especially because Mhach gets into Void Scent, and every time the Asians get involved with someone, whether it's just a group of bandits in Thanalan or some lonely woman in Gridania, it's always darkness. It's always Void Scent.
It always sticks with Void Scent, yeah. Void Scent or Primals.
And I mean, in this particular case, they don't even necessarily have to do much. They just have to give a couple researchers a little nudge.
Yeah.
So the War of the Magi does break out around 1250, continues on for a couple centuries, which is fairly impressive, though it may have been a thing like there's similar wars in our history that went on for well over a human lifetime, where there were flare-ups, but there was a continued state of hostility throughout, even during the points where there was less fighting. Around 1500 years into the 5th Astral Era is where a bunch of stuff starts to happen all at once. One of the first big ones is that Mhach arranges for Nimian sailors to receive a vessel that contains a captured Void Scent. They, of course, have no idea what it truly is, bring it back to Nim, where the Void Scent unleashes a disfiguring disease called the Green Death. Victim's skin turns green, their nose and ears slough off, all sorts of familiar sounding symptoms, and the afflicted get quarantined in the Wanderer's Palace, which is eventually sealed underwater. But even with all of that, that's not really enough, and you start to have this really huge sense of hysteria, this huge paranoia that is going to eventually destroy Nim, where all of the other attempts had failed.
Mm-hmm. So the one thing that's the law book sort of fails to mention here, which I guess I'm wondering about your opinions on. Ozma. When we enter Ozma, we get sucked in the black hole when we fight Ozma. That's Nim, right? We're seeing images of Ocean. We're seeing the same sort of architecture, and we find a great big Ozma-sized hole in Adalanosha, isn't it, where the floating city is?
Right.
So, did that happen before or after the Green Death, do you think? Because I've always thought that the Green Death was sort of contained, and the Mhach were sort of expecting that to be the crippling blow, but it wasn't quite enough, and they needed to basically go the nuclear option, right?
I've got this. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Damn. Okay, I've got this on a 40-year from like 1510 to 1550, where closer to 1510, you have Amdapor launching their Void Scent across Rothlit and sending Mahisha in. Do you remember the NM?
Oh, that's the one that was.
Wait, the S rank?
Yeah, the big Taurus.
Oh, yes.
So I would have that closer to 1510. And then 1550 is the hysteria ending everything, the Green Death, Wanderer's Palace. And then in there is where I have some kind of progression where the lower ranked Void Scent fail, Mahisha fails, and then Ozma hits somewhere after the Green Death Arise, but before everything collapses. But I'm not sure where in that 40-year span it would be.
Yeah.
But so you think Ozma and the Green Death are vaguely concurrent?
Vaguely.
Okay.
I could see that if, depending on how good their defensive techniques and magics were, if they had maybe some way to not completely stop it, but at least partially resist Ozma's effects. Such that it was able to capture some stuff, but couldn't wipe them out.
So one thing we haven't talked about yet was with the Nimians. Where did they get their fairies?
Oh, where they get their fairies?
Well, isn't that where?
Arcanum,
it's very vaguely explained. It's very vaguely explained.
My understanding.
Okay, so
go ahead.
Are you familiar with how when you create a carbuncle, you're basically taking ether and giving it shape with a mathematical formula and an essence that's in association with a gemstone?
Okay.
They do something very, very similar, except they're taking all of these energies from nature and creating not a carbuncle, but a fairy. And instead of creating a new one with a mathematical formula every time, they create one the first time, and they bind it to the soul stone. So every time it's summoned from the summoner, it kind of gets that template from the soul stone. And because soul stones remember things over time, it gains an identity and experience.
Yeah. I, again, like the kind of artificial intelligence comparison here, where you're shaping in this very particular way. Like I always thought of the carbuncle as not necessarily being specifically alive, but you have shaped ether to give it a very specific set of instructions for how it should behave on all this stuff, and it creates this semblance of a living thing.
Agreed.
Must imagine a lava scorpion.
So in theory, you could do that.
So,
Yeah, sure.
So
why not?
basically, Eos and Selene are like little programs built into a USB drive that is a soul stone.
No,
Pretty much, they're sub-programs.
I think on one end of the spectrum, you've got golems, like the more basic golems that we see, and stuff like carbuncles. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got the anima, and somewhere in the middle, I think, is the fairy.
Okay.
Oh! Have you seen Archer? You remember how Krieger has that like holographic anime wife?
Kuriga-san.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's where we're going. Okay.
Okay, yeah, maybe not full points for class, but I think it's a reasonable analogy here.
I think
And
so.
a
Yeah,
memorable
I think
one.
so too. I think so too.
Okay, so
I think the Arcanima spectrum could go along that same route, where you have like the marionettes on one hand and the avatars on the other hand, because you're splitting off your ether either way, but one of them you're kind of maintaining control over it and it's still part of you, and the other way you're imbuing it into something that's going to forever control something else. It's gone.
Right.
So you've got. So what you're kind of saying is that the carbuncles, the fairies, and these golems are kind of on the same spectrum,
Conceptually, yeah.
whereas
Yeah.
the Void Center are on a totally different plane.
Right.
Okay,
Yes.
that's interesting to know.
Yeah. Huh. So yes, we do have the Great Ruin of Nim happening. They managed to, again, despite being a very small nation, their defensive magics, their military tactics, all of that, helped them resist powers much larger than them for a very long time, but that internal ripping asunder is what's going to finally get them. Also around this time, we have the Battle of Amdapor, which is where Mhach finally makes their move to invade Amdapor, and their managed to put together a large Void Sent army that is able to very quickly overrun Amdapor Keep. I'm not quite sure why it fell so easily, if it was just a sheer numbers or if there's something else going on with it. But the Mhach army summons Diablos in order to finish off the city of Amdapor. Amdapor uses its white magic to awaken all of its guardians, awaken the strongest stuff it has, and they are successful in sealing away Diablos. They can't destroy it, but they are able to seal it, which we accidentally wake up couple, 15 centuries later. Good job, us.
Yay.
But at that time, they seal away Diablos, and with that taken away, the Mhach army is forced to withdraw. So this is kind of a victory for Amdapor, but at this point, really, no one wins. We've had centuries of magical warfare. Eorzea was already not doing great in the ether department, and that battle is the last straw. At that point, the ethereal balance is completely out of whack, very heavily aspected towards water, and they start seeing the portents of this huge catastrophic flood. As those signs start showing up, the leaders of the remaining city-states, we know of 3. It's possible that there are others remaining at this point, but we don't have any remnants of them if so. But they agree to stop fighting, declare a truce, and make the preparations to survive the oncoming calamity. And it's at this time that the first grand companies are formed. The idea of this emergency force that takes the entirety of a city-state's might, its economic power, its military power, all of its resources, and it wields it in this really coordinated manner in order to address this existential threat.
Yours in the Alliance 1.0.
Pretty much.
Mm-hmm. And that takes us from the 5th Astral Era into the 5th Umbral Era and the Calamity of Water.
The Great Flood.
Sixth Umbral Era.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you're... I'm always confused
Umbral
on the
comes
numbering
before
order.
Astral.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah.
This is the 6th Umbral Era. I always get that ordering mixed up. Sorry about that. So this great flood sweeps over Eorzea. Rivers and lakes and ponds, all these bodies of water begin swelling, going beyond their boundaries. Tidal waves are hammering the coasts. Each of the city-states has their own answer to it. Mhach constructs the Void Ark, this floating sanctuary, powered by over 1,000 Void Scent, including one of the strongest, Scathach the Shadow Queen. Their control over Scathach is imperfect, and her minions eventually break loose and slaughter the inhabitants of the Ark. Scathach is eventually restrained, but it requires a ritual that does take the lives of the few remaining passengers. And so that's how we ended up with this derelict ship floating among the clouds with just Ketchi aboard.
This is one of the poetic moments. Do you remember when you were talking earlier about how Mhach started building protections into Void Scent?
Mm-hmm.
The part that I find kind of the most poetic about all of this is that they learned a lot of those protections from the Void Scent. And like we're taught how Void Scent work and how to summon them because Void Scent want to be in our realm. They want kind of just that foothold to get free later. But because they're learning them from the Void Scent are very sneakily putting deliberate flaws into this whole system that eventually snowball into Skahak getting out.
Yeah, what can go wrong with that, right?
Yeah, like you're summoning this thing, you're binding it to you. It clearly has your best interests in mind.
Well, they'd also lost the Nullstone.
Correct.
Yeah.
They didn't have that with them, so their one sort of Deus Ex Machina was not available to them at the time. Speaking of the Great Flood, there's an interesting discussion point here because until fairly recently, the only real answer we had for the cause of the Great Flood was actually the elementals. And,
yes.
Awesome.
And the elementals themselves claim responsibility in 1.0. And I'm
The
sort
White
of
Mage
wondering...
quests, right?
Yeah, and I'm wondering at this point, I've been wondering for a while, whether the elementals actually believe that they caused it or whether they use that as a tool against the Gridanians saying, hey, we'll make another calamity. We did it before.
Since Realm Reborn dropped, I've had a headcanon. Like, again, this is totally unconfirmed, shooting from the hip. I have no proof. Elementals used to be everywhere. They used to be anywhere that ether was kind of thick. They would just kind of form. And it led me to believe that perhaps the elementals, being pure ether, have the point of view of just the general concept of the ether. So the elemental Ohasok talks about how their kind was enslaved in the War of the Magi, which might be them seeing the ether being overdrawn and harnessed. That's how they might experience that, as their enslavement. And they might see...
That's interesting. That's interesting because I thought that the implication sort of wrapped up in that is that the Amdapor started using elementals in more sophisticated guardians. And that's why they had these more intricate, these more powerful golems. Was precisely because they were using the elemental souls rather than constructing
There's
one.
a lot of possibilities.
Nothing.
I actually did have something similar to that, where to what you had, Moose, where like the elementals are kind of this embodiment of the land and its ethereal balance. So when it talks about being overwhelmed by sorrow and just like crying these tears, it's like, is that what it feels like to be over water aspected? They feel it as like this sadness and sorrow.
Right, that urge, that like the Ohasok talks about the urge to keen, to cry out. Like that could just be their perception of elemental imbalance.
Yeah, yeah.
The other one
again,
is why water?
This is a horrible topic Like,
Yeah,
why are they those elements?
Woo! The
Do you remember-
neuroscience of ethereal constructs.
Do you remember the Mughals talking about the calamity that wiped out the floating continent?
Yeah, talking about
Yeah.
the calamity of wind.
It originally talked about a great rain of fire.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, so wait, there's a great rain of fire and then a calamity of wind. Could they have brought too much fire aspect into it and then beckoned the wind forward?
Mhm.
And I started creating this like PowerPoint chart.
Mhm.
And I spent weeks trying to figure out how the elements rocked back and forth. And I created this whole thing for each era and how it could have been balanced. And it was like a rowboat rocking and beckoning each calamity forward and elemental imbalances. And just as I wrapped it up, one of the devs came into the forum and was like, "Oh, fire? That's a typo."
Oh!
Yeah. Well, see, when we look at a calamity of water, like the first, I guess, impulse I have is like, well, black mages, they're using lightning, they're using ice, they're using fire. The white mages are using like earth and wind. They're not really using much water, so maybe it could literally just be a case of the kinds of magic that everyone is wielding that they're neglecting water. And
water
that's
was kinda
all that's
left out.
Left. Yeah, and that seems like such a silly sort of simple explanation, but yeah, it's this is one of those points that has always really bothered me, is why we end up with these certain elemental leanings with our calamities.
I'm ready for Square Enix to cop out and say that when the worlds were divided, that it was not only
it was certain
not
ethereal
only
aspects. Yeah.
Right, not only divisions of light and darkness, but also certain elemental aspects. So we just absorbed the world that was a little closer to water then.
Oh, please.
Clearly it's
I know.
because the Amdapor armies were like, anyone using fluid aura, that shit's annoying. You're getting kicked out.
It was just all the black mages. Fire,
No,
fire,
but-
ice, ice, fire, fire, ice, ice. You've got to use water.
Yeah.
Clearly it was Lava Scorpion being annoyed at all the steam when people...
Would you shut the fuck up, that lava scorpion shit? God damn, dude.
Come on, Square Enix, just give him a minion.
So,
I'm sure that
back to-
I'm sorry, I just want to interject. I'm sure they use it, as a real life kind of referencing, the biblical flood. But it's interesting to figure out how they work it into the world lore in this game, though.
Someone pointed out to me a while ago, and I thought this was interesting. Eorzea has experienced one of each of the hypothetical apocalypses that Earth could have. Like being burned away by the sun, snowball, Earth, great flood,
Meteor.
I actually super liked that back when it first happened, because okay, they've had one of each element and they think that it's done. Wait, it's Bahamut. It's the non-elemental calamity. And then we find out we've got another 7 in store potentially.
Yay.
Yay.
So jumping back to the history, just because we're near the end,
Mhm.
so that's all going on with the Void Arc. For the actual land of Mhach itself, the entirety of the city gets submerged, and the returning refugees find that these lands they had been using for growing food, for doing all this stuff, the place is a salt marsh now. Nothing's growing there. So they've got nowhere really to return to that's suitable to live. Now, so that's Mhach. For Nim, what's left of their Marine Corps deploys Operation Maelstrom, which is this huge floating net of protective wards. The citizens themselves retreat to the slopes of Mount Ogamoro, and Operation Maelstrom is able to blunt some of the biggest waves, so it's not completely destroyed, but there's just way too much there. There's too much for Operation Maelstrom to completely stop it. And the coast gets pulverized down to reefs. So even though a lot of the citizens are able to survive by retreating to the mountain, there's nowhere left for them to rebuild. Finally, for Amdapor, while in other circumstances, they might have been able to put up wards that would have diverted the floodwaters and kept them safe. the land has been utterly exhausted by the requirements to seal Diablos. And so the Amdapori are forced to abandon the city. They actually evacuate their citizens to the mountains of Abalathia's Spine. I think a lot of them did go to the Girabania area.
A lot of them did go to Girabania. So we have a sort of soft confirmation that the Alamegans are actually the inheritors of Amdapor, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, as those waters recede, the elementals take what's left of Amdapor and they seal it away under blankets of magical plant growth, obscure it from the eyes of people, and those ruins do remain hidden for the entirety of the 6th Astral Era. It's only once they get weakened in the Calamity that we're able to see the Amdapori Keep or the city of Amdapor again.
Now, kind of jumping back to with the Mhach, they also, when they find that their lands have been basically ruined, they also go to Abalathia's Spine, correct? A number of them?
Yeah, well,
at least
that's what the game is kind of telling us as we move into Stormblood?
Yeah,
well,
Red Mage.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
From what we can tell, like all of the aristocracy, all of like the upper echelons, they're on the Void Ark. They had this grand city designed for them that they were going to hang out in for 100 years or however long it would take for things to get cleaned up below, and then they'd come back down and sort of pick up where they left off. Now they all got wiped out, but the fact that black magic survived necessitates the fact that there were some black mages that fled up into Ablathia's Spine and into Girabania specifically. Now we know that the following Umbral Age and the beginning of the 6th Astral Age was sort of typified by this deep distrust of magic and subsequently a persecution of any magic users. So
not quite as extreme as the 4th Astral was.
No, not quite as extreme. But we're gonna see. I think we're gonna see some sort of really poetic pieces of lore around the red mages, because suddenly, these sort of, they were previously rulers of the realm on opposite sides of this war, and suddenly they've got the whole world against them, and they've had to put aside their differences and sort of form some sort of community, and out of that we've got red magic. So that's one thing I'm really interested to see and really looking forward to. There's a couple more things that I want to touch on, particularly in regards to like racial distribution and stuff like that. So we know now that Mhach and Amdapor both did have like large Cure populations, right?
Mm-hmm.
We also understand that the Highlanders were a tribe that only really sort of developed after the floods from the survivors in Girabania. So what is our opinion on all of those Highlander statues that we see throughout the various Mhach standings?
Before I mention the statues, I was right with you on the development of the Highlanders. In 1.0, it seemed like each race had one that's a little older than the other. And like, for instance, the Wildwood were a bit older than the Duskwights, because the Duskwights didn't come back from Gelmora. They still stayed underground. They stayed in the caves. Right. And I was with you that like the Highlanders seemed like the ones that had developed that, brawn from being up so high.
Yeah.
And
that's what all the sources seem to imply, right?
There's a couple of things lately that have put a damper on that, and I'm mad about it. I don't know what to think yet.
Well, how much of it could be?
But I think it's like the. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, how much of it could be similar to look at ancient Roman statues, how they are really enhanced versus what the reality of it was. Could a lot of that be just enhancing what they thought would be a perfect being, of perfect physical specimen?
See, I've thought that, but it's like literally the model a Highlander.
Well, because they have that to use within the game, it was kind of a cheat as far as a development thing goes. But
yeah, there's always a question about how much stuff is they slop a lore justification on it later.
My first impulses on seeing it is like, are these representations of Rhalgr? Are these representations of Nald and Thal? Are these sort of ancient heroes that, like you say, were sort of hamming up in the Roman style? And it's just never made clear what exactly they are and what exactly they're representing.
My headcanon cops out. I go right to Rhalgr, that it's just... Because he's holding the purple meteor.
Yeah, me too.
It really seems like that might be him. And the connections to the Highlanders, I'm so confused about, because I was saying, I was right with you that they probably developed more recently. But, like, you've got now Highlanders coming from Ilsabard and Othard, which... I mean, you can kind of blame movement between the last 1,000 years on that. But then you have the Lost Lamb triple triad card that says Highlanders domesticated sheep in the 5th Umbral era.
Yeah, and it's like...
What is happening? They just threw a wrench into the whole thing. But yeah, until told otherwise, my headcanon's that they're Rhalgr.
Well, could they have confused it with confused 5th and 6th like Seyrr did? Possibly.
So I'm looking at the triple triad card right now, and it says Highlanders first domesticated sheep in the Age of Endless Frost. So yeah, before even the start of the 5th.
Wow.
Yeah,
mistakes do happen, though. I mean, if you look at the lore book, even in the lore book, they're confusing Rothlet and Rotano.
That's true.
It says that Mhach is sending Void Sent across Rothlet Sound to attack Nami, which is like, unless it went all the way around the other side of the world, through Othard, New World, came all the way back around, which, I mean, a Void Sent could do it, but it's super inefficient.
Check where you're fishing your oysters from.
Fujiwawa in chat's asking where these statues are exactly.
Throughout the entire Void Arc is the best place to see them.
Yeah, the Void Arc, the city of Mhach, the Weeping City.
So basically throughout the entire 24-man.
Yeah.
When you finish a run, don't leave immediately. If you use return, you'll jump to the beginning of it, and you can walk through and look at stuff at a little bit of a slower pace.
Well, you got 5 minutes.
If you're looking for a quick one, I think aren't there a few around the Diabolus Arena?
Yeah, there are actually. There are a few around the Diabolus Arena.
Yeah,
that's true.
I'm always really insecure saying his name because it's Diablos, Diabolos, and Diabolus. I'm not sure which one's right.
Well, we get so many pronunciations.
I was confident until just now.
Yeah, I was always Diablos.
So with the Highlanders, I think, thinking about it, it's probably safe to assume that if they developed in Girabanya in the Highlands through natural selection or ethereal interference with particular aspects, it's pretty safe to assume that if there were Midlanders that were put in similar situations in other parts of the world, they would also become Highlanders.
Right,
So
I wouldn't disagree with that.
Yeah, it could be that Highlanders developed at the beginning of the 6th Astral Era, but it wasn't the first time that Midlanders had become Highlanders.
Convergent evolution?
Yeah.
Hell, it might just be the name that they give to. That might just be the name they give to anyone who has like this size and this appearance, regardless of the genetic background,
or dependent on their elevation where they live.
Yeah. Well, I mean, on the other extreme, we've got characters that have explicitly Midlander models like Ida and Minfilia that are canonically Highlanders.
Quirks is a character creator, right?
Yeah, so it could be a case of when we're seeing a really, really buff Midlander, and we're just assuming that they're a Highlander when they're actually not.
Yeah, could be.
Since we're talking about the 24-mans, I'm going to use it as a really clumsy segue. I've got a little post-it here from when you said that you were wondering how Amdapor keep fell so quickly. Ferdiad.
Yes.
Yeah,
he was involved in
mess.
the assault on that.
Yeah,
and he got sealed in a basement. But
and that's why we don't fight him until the hard mode when he gets unlocked.
He was whispering to the lambs.
And during the normal mode, we killed all of the lambs, and that ended up being the blood-soaked sacrifice that was needed to bring him back. Good job, us.
Yeah,
I can't wait to see what the hell he does with the lambs in 4.0. I asked Koji if the lambs were gone, and Koji asks Oda, and Oda goes, yeah, no, the lambs are dead. And Koji goes, no, they're not.
Oh, that had to be an interesting conversation later.
Oh, no.
He's like, if you want him to be around, you have to write a quest. He's like, I will write a quest.
So what we got? Is there anything else in Amdapor or in Mhach or in Nim that sort of sticks out to us that are worth discussing?
I mean, we've talked a little bit about the floating city, which, hang on, I've got it in the sightseeing log here.
Yeah,
I think
and the
the idea is
sightseeing
that,
log
like,
goes on about over-aspected air crystals, right?
Yeah, and I think it was, it seemed to be something where they were buried for a long period.
Mm-hmm.
But then just something changed up the land's balance, and it ended up ripping it out of the ground and getting it floating.
Mm-hmm. Probably Ozma.
The accepted theory as to how the city was torn from the realm involves the over-aspecting of corrupted ruin crystals, phenomenon witnessed late in the 6th Astral Era, possibly when all that crazy shit with the Tomos appearing at Aetherites and the like was going on. So I wonder if it was just somewhere on Vilbrand that was inaccessible until that point.
Oh, okay.
Note it does say that's the accepted theory, not like a confirmed one, just this is what the naturalists are agreeing on at the moment.
Right, the adventure log and the lore book are both fallible.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's something that I need to remind people all the time with the lore book is that it's a diegetic source, like it's supposed to have been written by Aelosian scholars, and that it can be sort of contradicted at any time.
Mm-hmm.
Right, you've got a few moments where the lore book seems omniscient because it's talking about things that no one could possibly know, but those are things that just really, really needed clearing up. And there are things in it that could be or that could be incorrect. They could be incorrect assumptions, like, that guy is dead.
Like the bit about Nail Van Darnus is one that comes to mind, because I really like that, even though it's something that we are being told about, that the characters in game don't know about it. That Alpha Note is saying, "Oh, Bahamut must have brought Nail back wrong."
Yeah, it's like, how could they know that?
Right. And I like that they do keep it consistent. It's like, okay, the characters couldn't know that, so we're keeping it where they don't know that. I really do appreciate that.
That's actually my favorite excuse. Like, why did they even try to write this off with Urianger? Like, nobody ever said Urianger knew he was talking about.
That's true.
He just pretends to be all-knowing.
Yeah, you learn to trust him.
It's a good shtick if you can get people to believe it.
So that's how you got it.
I don't know what you're talking about. Let's see, we've got about so that's all I had for the timeline, and then we had 5 or 6 pages of notes here, which was some interesting back and forth discussion. I'm not sure if there's any parts of this that we specifically want to share here or discuss further.
Well, I think that first bit that you've got in there talking about the 12 prior to the 5th Astral, I mean, that might be something interesting to discuss a little bit.
So yeah,
I think that's a really interesting one. Because the lore book says that at the dawn of the 5th Astral, we basically returned to this worship of the 12. Although I'm not sure that there are any really explicit references to the 12 before this time. I mean, we've got little things like we look at there's some aqueducts in Azazlal that have been lifted from Mericidia, which have the symbol that we would attribute to a Zama plastered all over them. Yeah. Which we learned later is a symbol that at the time was attributed to Sephiroth, that we obviously decided, looked something like the sun when we saw it around the place. And I think one of Koji's explanations was that in sort of subsequent eras, you see ruins that have these symbols sort of plastered on them, and you're like, oh, well, this wasn't completely destroyed, and everything around it was, so this must be some kind of magical ward or whatever, and they start attributing it to their own gods, right?
The only concrete connection is the runestones from 1.0, and those were developed around the time of Tanaka, but released. I think they were released that December before the announcements were really.
Fun hit.
So yeah. It was under
Fun
Tanaka.
historical note, that is also the thing that gave us Rowena.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. And that's sort of the idea that I had, is that, early third Astral Era, there was 12 worship, and the Allagans sort of did the same thing that the Garlanes have done more recently, realizing that faith sort of gives you primal problems, and that we need to do away with that.
Yeah.
We haven't been given reason to doubt it.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that we can actually verifiably prove is that these symbols were in use, but we don't necessarily know a lot about what the symbols were associated with, if the associations changed over time.
We know at least one of the associations did change in the famous.
I did find the sightseeing log record for that structure in Azislaw, and it's described as a cathedral designed in a distinct Mercidian style. The architecture suggests a place of worship by a tribe of tree-like beings who believe themselves remnants of Sephiroth. To research the link between faith and primal summoning, the Allagans moved the ancient structure to Azislaw from its original location on the southern continent.
Yeah.
So, was this symbol introduced from outside? The god or goddess might have existed, but this association came later.
I'm just leaving the door open on this one, because since they came from the Tanaka era, there's a bit of cleanup that needs to be done because of lore that's changed since then. The big elephant in the room is Menfina, keeper of the twin moons. Why in the early Astral Era would they be depicting twin moons when they wouldn't invent the second moon until the end?
Were the runestones specifically supposed to be from the early third?
Ish.
Or just
it's really hard to say. I don't doubt that they're authentic, because both Rowena's benefactor and everyone in between has said that they were authentic Allagan artifacts. But
right, was it early third or late third would be the big question here.
I don't know why they would. Let's assume that they were legitimately of the 12 worship symbols of the 12. They had abandoned them by the late era, but we can't assume that everyone abandoned them, right? Maybe there was a holdout carving runestones at the end of the era, so I have no idea.
You've got there was dissent in the Allagan Empire, so even though the majority of them did have the atheistic bent, I could see those rebellions going for worship of the gods, saying that this Allagan stuff goes against the gods.
They just didn't know about Dalamud and sort of assumed that it was a real moon.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's possible.
I'm having this thought, and I don't know why, but I'm having this thought that you go back in the Star Wars canon, you go back to Attack of the Clones, and they were already drawing up designs for the Death Star. Could it be a case of that? Early stone carvings of this weapon that they want to develop in thousands of years?
That's the thing. Dalamud originally wasn't a weapon. It was a solar power satellite.
Yeah.
So
trust me, by the time we get this thing working, it's going to be up there.
And it's hey, here's our plans for the greatness of the Allagan Empire.
So there is one other really tacit connection that's probably going to spawn a debate, but when you have things in 14, there's always this phrase, the seeds of faith, where a story came from, what the origin of that story is. And there are very early hints that Azima and Azim from the Aura share very, very far back some seed of faith. So the 12 worship might have, right. I don't want to go that far yet, but they're probably the same. They're probably the same.
Almost certainly.
But if that's true, then we have some evidence of at least what would inspire the 12 existing before Alog. Or at least before the 5th.
Right.
Even if they had different names, that conceptually they had common seeds, right?
This is where my headcanon starts to itch.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm going to invent a big house of cards. They're going to release one thing. It's all coming down.
As long as you don't start picking up the PowerPoint, I think you're okay.
Oh, that happens all the time, though. It really does.
Yeah.
Do you recycle bin?
It happens all the time.
Way to go, Seyrr. You destroyed his hopes and dreams.
That was easier than I expected.
Well, you're good at it.
So the next point you've got is about the Archons, and that kind of leads me to something that we didn't really discuss in regards to the 6th Umbral era, which is, of course, Neon Krepsen, who I think that we generally count among one of these archons of this era, right?
Wait, which one?
Neon Crepsum was the Seawolf Rogan from presumably Airslant, who sailed down after doing some astrology and foretelling that this flood was coming. He sailed down to Eorzea and tried to rescue as many people as he could.
Mm.
And they got basically they got picked up by some big waves and deposited somewhere in a Blathia's spine in this big shipwreck, and they went through this sort of odyssey where they traveled to the Dravanian hinterlands and built another boat and sailed it back up north to the island that we now know of as Charlayan.
Is this in the lore book? I'm trying to remember this.
Yeah, if you go, well, you'd have to go through to the Charlayan stuff.
Got it. Flipping through.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there you go.
There we go.
Yeah.
Charlayan. Here we are, legendary.
Wait,
yep, there you go.
Did we
Page
just stumble on
169.
something Seyrr didn't know?
There's plenty of stuff I don't know. My brains don't know everything. They know how to do research.
He knew where the information was, ish. It's in the book. He knows where to look. Okay.
Yep, yeah. I've got it. Page 169.
Yeah.
I gotta lay that forgiveness groundwork for the next time I have to look something up.
Moose, I think this is the only clear and definitive reference that we have to one of the archons as an actual historical figure, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's two. I want to say, I think it's the same Umbral era Aldbar. Mm-hmm. Have you heard that name?
I have.
Okay, so that's the only other one. But I think that he was pretty much just a foreshadow of Thancred that they dumped into 1.0.
What can you tell us about him?
Very powerful mage, such so that statues of Rhalgr are based on the memory of him. Mm-hmm. Something happened in the war where he went from being an archon to being extremely depressed and despairing, and he turned up with the Ascians. Well, turned up with the cadre of immortal mages. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it really just seems like a foreshadow of Thancred. Like, by the way, the people fighting the immortal mages can get really sad and then become one.
Right. Okay. You think it's something more like Thancred than it is something like what Elidibus was trying to do to Urianger quite recently?
That's my first assumption, but you got to keep in mind that that's extremely biased by the fact that I just don't trust Elidibus.
Yeah,
I don't think...
Am I the only one that thinks Elidibus is pretty much the only guy that we can trust?
I think we're probably safer trusting him than anyone else.
He's never lied to us.
I don't think that's saying much.
I don't think Elidibus has ever lied to us.
Like,
I don't think he
has no shortage of knives to put in our backs.
That's my big thing, is I don't think he's ever lied to us, but I think he's hidden everything that might contradict his story, that he's just feeding us confirmation bias. Mm-hmm. But I mean, again, I am really attached to that headcanon, so anything I say on that is going to be super biased.
But so what you're saying is that he's not necessarily lying to us, directly lying to us, but he is giving us an incomplete picture.
Right. My example would be the Warriors of Darkness. He led them to believe that they had a binary choice, that it was one or the other and they should pick the lesser evil, and that wasn't true. He just led them to believe what would be most convenient for his plan.
Yeah. Did he know what Hydaelyn would be capable of?
Well, he knew that even if she did go forward with what she did with Minfila, they would work to his advantage anyway.
All right. Speaking of Hydaelyn, we do have a question in chat. Hargoon87's asking, why did Hydaelyn start losing her power?
Oh.
I mean, is it related to some of these calamities that every time?
It's related. So what we call the calamities, which is the Ascians refer to as rejoinings or ardors, is basically forcing Hydaelyn to the point where she's sort of so weak and so drained of ether that she has to reintegrate one of those shards into herself to sort of pick up her supplies, right? So as we're sort of approaching these ardors, she's becoming progressively more and more weakened, and is sort of more and more crippled in what she can do without having to reach out and cause one of those rejoinings, at least as far as I understand it.
Here's where we're starting to speak like a little more conceptually. We're starting to make guesses and speculate. And I'm hesitant to make a jump quite that far, but that is in the right vein. Like every time a calamity happens, Zodiark gets a little more power and a little more is taken away from her. The whole balance of power shifts. And it's especially true because she's giving shards of herself away to these fighters to defend her.
That was actually something in our discussions I had wondered about. Like, you have a calamity in Eorzea, and this becomes something that manages to annihilate an entire shard, and I was not 100% clear how the one leads to the other.
Well, the way I understood it is because you're doing enough damage to the source that she has to pull in that ether from that shard to repair it.
This is the only spot where he and I apparently have, like, incongruent headcanon at the moment, because we are in speculation mode.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's legit.
I don't think that Hydaelyn has any control over it. I think that I don't think she's involved in like the collapse of a world, because it seems like that ether is being funneled away from her because it's going towards Zodiark's rebirth. So I think the calamity is just the blowing out of a wall between the two and having it come back in. Like you're healing a crack in the mirror and it becomes one mirror again. But we are, again, in total speculation mode. So I'm not saying Ethys is wrong. We just have totally different assumptions at the moment.
But it's still hard for me to see how the calamity in one, like, how this thing ends up being the thing that can shatter a dimensional wall somewhere else. Like, that's the bit that's weird for me.
Yeah, all we know for certain is that the Ascians believe they're trying to make the world whole, and each of these rejoining sort of gets them one step closer to that.
It rejoins part of it.
Yeah.
My metaphor for that, like you were talking about the AI metaphor earlier, my metaphor for this one is a broken mirror, where there was one universe, and when Zodiark was expelled, it stressed the mirror so hard that it cracked. And now there's a copy of that original, what the contents of the original mirror are now copied into each shard of it.
Each shard kind of reflects back something that's similar, but not quite the same.
Right. So if you were able to heal two sections of the mirror by taking away the boundary between them, by blowing out that boundary and having them become one piece again, then that's what I imagine the rejoining to be.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I agree with that.
Interesting.
But that would be more of a positive thing for Hydaelyn at that point, would it not?
Well, what's being rejoined here?
Or is it rejoining
If
over
any
to
of that.
Zodiark, potentially?
Well, it ostensibly it kills everyone that is on that reflection. It destroys them.
Yeah.
And secondly, the mirror being whole is the requisite condition for the return of Zodiark.
Yeah, I think the idea was that Zodiark was what was shattered into all these separate shards. Like Zodiark's power was split among all these worlds.
I don't know if this is going to turn out to be true, but Square Enix is definitely invoking a bit of the old Promathia from 11 trope.
Yeah!
Because La Habrea outright says, render up your souls that Lord Zodiark might be reborn. So like when you're collapsing a world and everyone that's living there has an individual soul with its own barriers, and all of a sudden they're all dead and that ether's being funneled somewhere else, that seems like it might be going straight to Zodiark's rebirth.
Right, okay. So that's like the only point where you and I sort of incongruent, where I feel like Hydaelyn's being forced to reintegrate that ether into herself in order to heal, whereas you think that that's going to the formation of Zodiark.
I feel like I need to choose a third option here just to be contrary.
Oh, please do.
Add more.
Working on it.
Are you done yet?
That's the Archons. Is that what we've got with the Archons?
I think mostly that, a little bit of discussion of like what exactly they are. Let me see, looking through the notes here. One point that I thought was interesting is that the seventh calamity was pretty unusual in that there was a calamity, there was a rejoining of a shard, but there wasn't as much destruction of Eorzea. So the society is already back at the point where, hey, we could totally do another one of those calamities.
Yeah, well, it's a little ironic, isn't it? Because we think that we've like mostly mitigated the damage of the calamity, and that is true on one hand. But on the other hand, it's sort of playing straight into the Ascians' hands because they don't have to wait for us to rebuild ourselves to the point where they can cause another, massive fallout of ether. It's like like you say, we're pretty much already there again.
Right. It used to take 1,500 years to get populations back up, to get cities back up, to gather enough power to want to go to war and to be willing to go to war and give something the Ascians can use to keep escalating that war towards calamity. And we don't need that. We're already ready to go to war with Garlemald right now.
Yeah. We're about to start wars on 2 fronts.
Which I think plays into why Elidibus sent us after the Triad, because they were just an unexpected piece on the chessboard where they would have upended how this war would have played out, and he needed them off the board immediately for something more predictable, the Alliance versus Garlemald.
Makes sense. Let's see.
So Fujiwawa in chat saying Archons are just people that survive a calamity and remember the time before? To kind of simplify? Is that kind of how they're understanding it?
Maybe?
He uses the term in a few different ways. It's like the Warriors of Light.
Yeah.
So you have the Archons who are just like the people who've earned PhDs in Charlayan. You have the Archons...
Oh, god damn it, Charlayan.
You have the Archons who are people who remember history, and you have the Archons who are people who are supposed incarnations of the 12. And it seems like the historians and the incarnations of the 12, most likely Heidelin's chosen, are different beings that are just kind of remembered together.
So
maybe.
Kind of like when they are given that gift, they are kind of imbued with those memories by Heidelin at that point?
Not necessarily. I mean, it's most of the time the Archons are people like... It's most of the time it's like, oh, they were these people who did stuff. Like, it's a role that gets assigned to people in the past based on what they did.
It's like a collective metonym for people who sort of step up to the plate when we're coming up towards a calamity.
Okay, so that's why we're referring to Louisoix as the Archon in this point? Because of what he did?
We refer to Louisoix
other than the Charlayan
in both senses, because he's already like literally a Charlayan Archon.
Right, but that's where the Charlayans pulled it from as learned people, so to speak.
And there's some question about...
in their arrogance, it seems so.
In Louisoix's case, I think Louisoix was happy to let people make their own assumptions. Like, they called him an Archon because he had his Charlayan PhD or whatever, like the Sage tattoo. But if you think 1,500 years ago, someone who shows up and says something bad's going to happen, they're remembered as prophets, as angels. So when like historians show back up recognizing the sign that a calamity is coming, Louisoix just shows up like, hey, by the way, there's a calamity coming, and everyone goes, oh, the angels are back. He's like, yeah, let's go with that.
Yeah, let's roll with that. Whatever it takes for you to get ready.
Yep. Whatever crutch they need to hang on to get through this.
Yeah.
Part of me had also wondered if Charlayan had intended for their PhD students to be the types of people who would have this knowledge, who could be these rocks of support, and then just by the time this actually happened, enough of that had been forgotten, or you had different people in charge that they were like, nope, fuck that, we're not doing this.
Well, they saw themselves as the keepers of ancient knowledge, and again, they have their roots in a sort of literal historical Archon in the Neon-Krepsen.
But they might have been using that term without full appreciation for the responsibilities it entails.
Well, I think that it just got diluted, and if you look at the Charlayan Forum and the Studium now, it's all political, and it's so close to the Garlean Empire. Like, they're really two sides of the same coin.
Woo, university politics.
At least that's how I understand it. So I think it's a title that they sort of set up in deference to Neon-Krepf and to the broader idea of what Archons are, as something that's just become diluted over time.
Yep. I mean, if you have this name that everyone recognizes that they have associations from, it's going to be really hard to not have a bunch of groups say, hey, let's use this really well-recognized name to hold up our ideals about this.
Yeah, sure.
Very interesting. Do we want to talk about this next question? What is the nature of the divine in Eorzea?
Oh, it's so nebulous and vague.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm asking. You guys had a lot of discussion back and forth, and I want to know if you guys want to discuss it.
It just ticks me off a lot because there's so many bits without answers, and that I feel like I'm never going to get answers for.
Sure. Is that something we can maybe save for maybe a future
lorecast?
lorecast?
We can absolutely discuss it. The topic annoys me, but that means I'll discuss it even more vociferously.
How are you guys feeling on continuing, discussing these different things about that? We're sitting at just almost about an hour and 3/4 right now, so.
Yeah, I could spend another 15 minutes talking.
All right. Shoot. So, do you want to talk about that, or do you want to talk about those 9 major groups that you guys were talking about further down?
The lost civilizations of the 5th Astral Era. I'm okay with either of those topics. How are you guys feeling?
Oh, I'm easy. Whatever you want to talk about.
Does anyone have an actual opinion here? I could roll some dice.
Oh my god! All right,
flipacoin.com.
let's talk about the nature of the divine, because this really depends on who you ask, right? So obviously we're referring to the 12 here, but we have a pretty hard confirmation of some of the primals being a literal historical figure that's sort of been immortalized in mythology.
Like this little core of a person that has this layer after layer of belief built around them.
And the best example of that, I think, is probably the Allegan general Garuda. And the
was that actually her name, or I think it was the Garuda Brigade, but was her name actually Garuda?
I'm pretty sure her name was literally Garuda. I'm not 100% on that, but I think so. And the fact that the Ixalion, as these chimerical creations of Alleg, were quite literally programmed to be sort of deferent towards her. And that, over time, as they've forgotten the historical figure, that's become their god. And if you ask the Garleans, if you ask Gaius in particular, the 12 are exactly the same thing. They're no different.
Yep. And side note, for those of you who didn't know it, this is why Garuda the Primal is a lady with feathers and boobs rather than an actual Ixal.
Right, exactly. So we assume that each of the primals are, born from similar circumstances. And it seems that, well, obviously the Garlands, but even like a lot of people in Eorzea seem to concede that the 12 are probably something like that. But there are a lot of people that think they are literally gods, and there's no strong evidence either way. I mean, other than things like Ramu seems to be a reimagining of Rhalga. We know that the Sylph sort of took someone else's god and decided they liked it.
I would love to know how that happened.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I don't know. What do you think of that, Moose? Have you got a clear theory on that, on the Ramu Rhalga thing?
Uh-oh,
we lost him.
Oh dear.
Earth to
Man
Moose.
down. Well, what do you think, sir?
So I mean, I think a large part of the question there is where the Sylphs even actually came from.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we still don't have a clear picture of their origin, do we? Or were they just like, hey, you have sufficient accumulations of ether that spontaneously achieve sentience and embedded themselves in plants?
Oh, you think that they're literally sentient cabbages?
I mean,
well, we've got sentient potatoes, so
maybe-ish.
Are they Cabbage Patch Dolls?
no.
They come from pods.
Yeah, and like the different, like their genders are flowering and non-flowering.
Mm-hmm. You see, my idea is that I mean, it's sort of how the Romans like adopted a lot of the Greek gods, right? Is that you sort of hear these old stories of these gods doing these amazing things, and you're like, oh shit, we want to be on that guy's side. Like, it seems like something like that might be going on with the whole Ramu Rhalga thing, but it's really, really unclear.
Yeah, I could see that. I I talked about it a bit in our discussion notes, but the thing that I really wonder about is the whole thing where, like, you have this stuff that's based on this thing built up out of all these beliefs, but those beliefs can change over time.
Because
And
a giant...
that-
Oh, go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, basically it becomes a giant game of telephone.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Which, even that wouldn't be a problem, except for the fact that the Ultima weapon works.
Right.
This idea that when you summon a primal, if the primal gets dispersed, okay, you can resummon it. Allag figured out that you can capture it and seal it, and as long as it's summoned, it can't be summoned again. Good job, full marks, really brilliant.
So,
Go forth and conquer the world.
Sorry, stupid question to interject. You remember the whole thing where SE had talked about the free companies being able to capture primals?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think we would have been given
Yes.
elegant technology to do that?
We get elegant technology for everything, so probably.
Yeah, that was
Yeah, I mean, I can't
so
really think of
vaguely
another way we do it.
I'm sorry, I just had to
was so
speculate
vague.
that one.
No, that's
Elegant
fine.
Pokeballs.
I'm not entirely sure. Am I back?
Yes, you're
Yeah,
back.
yeah, you're
Welcome.
back.
Yeah. All right.
That
So
idea
we're talking
was
about
so
Ramu
vague.
and Raga.
Oh, yeah. Just to touch up quickly on what Klaus was saying, I think the idea was so, like it's such a early stage at that point, I'm not sure they'd actually thought about the particulars that much.
Elegant Pokeballs.
Well, that's basically what Dalamud is.
Yeah.
That's
And Ultima Weapon, and a
that's
bunch of, and Azaslaw.
an Uber ball.
Well, I think we all agree, and Koji's made it clear as well that it is sort of a game of Chinese whispers. But the question is that at the sort of beginning of that, what is the real nature of these things that we now refer to as the 12? Were they archons? Were they regular people? Were they kings? Were they something divine? Were they
Right.
things like Midgardzimmer from outer space that landed here and have a heap of power? And
Oh, God, those guys are another entire topic segment in and of themselves.
Woo, space dragons.
It's supposed to be murky.
Space
Yeah.
Dragon.
yeah,
So, I
exactly.
mean-
I think that's why the whole thing about primal uniqueness and the whole idea of what makes them different up to no longer is because you've got a lot of murky stuff, and here is something definite. If you have a primal summoned, it's unique. You can't summon another the same. Like, here is something definite to latch on, and so I'm building out from that. It's like, okay, what makes it unique? What makes it different enough? Like, we had the example of a very radically different reimagining of Ifrit. That's like a much kinder, friendlier... Koji gave the example of roasting marshmallows. It's like, okay, like a hearth god Ifrit. Like, that would be different enough. But, like, what about one that's similar but a little bit? Like, where's the line? I'm trying to apply, like, clear scientific definitions to something that's this very murky...
Right, because there's a line
ill-defined
there,
concept.
but there's not a line between the Titan that we sort of are most familiar with, and then the Titan that's a little Gabu was his name.
Oh, so
Is that
sad.
right?
I think so.
It's like they're the same Titan, so they're
Right.
close enough. But this Ifrit roasting marshmallows is like just different enough. It's very vague. Like,
Right.
Have they explained why it's only one particular version of a primal that can be summoned?
Vaguely. When you pray to something, the idea of what you're praying to has been inspired by something. And that thing is usually something that was once alive, like Shiva or Mogul or
Bahamut.
Bahamut is another really good example. The two that I use for all of my examples are usually Garuda and Bahamut. But basically what happens is that once living thing that has inspired this faith has died and returned to the life stream, which is just this giant blender, and it rips everything that goes into it apart.
Like all these thoughts, all this stuff of what a person or an entity was. It's this huge assembly of thoughts and beliefs and mental constructs, and it gets ripped down into little components.
Right. I want to stress that it's like breaking a person down into their atoms. It's not just that they're separated. It's that there's nothing left of them but the fact that those atoms used to be that thing.
They're
So
like
Okay.
atoms of concepts, which is a really interesting idea. Like, I want to see that fucking periodic table.
So when you call out to Garuda, that faith has become enmeshed with the being that was once that Allagan general. So all of the pieces of what were once Garuda are being pulled back together towards that beacon. And when they're pulled together with a lot of corporeal and spiritual ether, it gives form to something, but that might be nothing like her. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. No, that's a great explanation.
It's got a couple of these little core concepts, but then all the stuff that's built around it is shaped by the summoner's belief.
To be absolutely clear, when Koji revealed this, it was Bahamut in the example. So we don't know if it's typical, we don't know if it's universal, but that's what happened to Bahamut at the very least. But it explains why you can't have more than one.
Thought on that, because Bahamut, it was something where the Ascians approached Tiamat and offered to do this so that to be able to call Bahamut back, and she took them up on the deal. So I'm wondering if it's something where the Ascians created these constructs, or if it's something that just occurs naturally.
Well, summoning is usually called, quote, the knowledge of the paragons. So I think that they usually have something to do with the summoning itself, but faith seems to arise on its own no matter where you go. So it's more or less the Ascians just showing up and going, hey, you know that thing you worship? I'm not going to tell you to summon it, but I'm going to tell you that you can. So,
but does stuff become summonable because at some point the Ascians go and poke around in the live stream and create these little ethereal atoms, these little points of anchoring, whatever, to be able to call it again?
I don't think they need to go that far. They don't even need to do anything that specific. I agree with Moose that there are definitely cases where you're pulling on like the bits of a historical formerly living person, kind of mashing them back together. But it seems to me that the way I've always thought about primals anyway is that you're creating like this very clear and specific idea, and if it's not clear enough and specific enough, then you can't summon it. You can't sort of formulate it into a into a form. But once that form has been sort of created and distinguished, you're sort of holding together like a little soul by, force of will, force of prayer, like any other magic. It's like you're just visualizing it. Basically that thing stays together when the primal is destroyed, when the body is destroyed. The fact that there's still that worship, there's still that people believing it and people willing it, that when it goes back to the live stream, that remains in this like little pocket, right? And that's what keeps getting dragged out each time.
But then does that change over time if the beliefs change, or does that just fade away? What happens over time? Because this stuff does change. Right. Also, side note, because I know someone's going to think about it or mention it at some point, possibly in the audience or someone listening later, Enkidu and Gilgamesh has been specifically declared to be quasi-non-canon with regards to this. That's they messed with it and made stuff somewhat non-canon for the Hildebrand scenario.
As canon as you want it to be and no further.
Pretty much. Which is true of everything, to be honest.
Yeah.
I call them bubbles. I assume that Hildebrand holiday events, they all happen in bubbles. Where everything...
I'm okay with that.
It's not a popular opinion, so be careful.
It is a useful abstraction because we are trying to fit a long-running MMO game into a timeline and a historical thing where it does not always fit neatly. You're going to abstract some stuff away.
All right, I think we can go ahead and wrap it up at that point. This was amazing, guys. I had such a blast listening to this, and you guys were amazing. Thank you so much for all of your hard work on this. Ethys, AnonyMoose, and Seyrr, thank you so much for all of this wonderful lore about the fifth astral, and then we kind of tangented off a little bit on the divine, so to speak. But, it's kind of fun to talk about.
You put enough people who talk about lore, and it does not matter what the original topic is. We are going to tangent.
Thanks for inviting
Seriously,
us.
it was nice meeting you both.
Yep.
Yeah.
I would
for having
love
us.
to do this again, maybe later on when we get a little bit more information in Stormblood.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Mhm.
See kind of what we
times.
get with, for Red Mage lore, for Samurais, and for the Kojian as well. I mean, they're going to have a whole just slew of lore that we can play off of. Where did
And with
those
some
primals
more
come from?
primals, we're good. Yeah, with more primals, we're going to have more points of data that we can try to fit into a clearer picture.
Yes, this was absolutely amazing. So I hope everybody out there listening live here at Twitch, as well as those on the podcast, really enjoyed this. If there's more that you guys want to know about, by all means, go ahead and send us an email, podcast@phoenixdownradio.com. You can leave us a message on our Twitter at PHXDNRadio, as well as on our website, phoenixdownradio.com. And if you guys are listening to us on the podcast, make sure you like, subscribe, follow us on iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play Music, as well as on YouTube when we get the video up there. And leave us a rating or review. It helps others to find us and helps us to grow in the community. So we really would appreciate that. Takes just a couple of minutes to do, and like I said, it's really helpful to us on that. And if you're really, really digging the show, and want more stuff like this, consider becoming a patron. Our Patreon page is located out at patreon.com/PhoenixDownRadio. And all the proceeds that we get for that will go to expanding the show, covering hosting costs, and allows us to do really cool things like giveaways, patron-only promotions, and things like that. So it's really helpful to us, and like I said, it's not required, but it's something that we can use to help expand. Ethys and AnonyMoose, again, thank you so much. Do you guys have any shout-outs you want to throw out there, or how you can be contacted out there in the world?
Shout out to AnonyMoose for all of his hard work archiving everything that so many of us use on a daily basis without even realizing it. But you can contact me and find me on Twitch and YouTube, Ethys Asher, and on Twitter at FFXIV.
And shout out to Ethys for dragging pretty much a much larger audience than I could ever get together in through that Twitch and YouTube. And I'm pretty much just on the forums, official forums, lore forum at all times, and Twitter is at AnonyMooseXIV.
And you're also a very large force out on GamerEscape.com.
Indeed.
So want to get that plug out there too. Chili?
Shout out to both Ethys and AnonyMoose for joining us today. Thank you so much. It's been nice to actually chat with you guys, for a longer period than we did before. Shout out to Samus Rageborn, aka Evolved Male, aka your girlfriend's favourite streamer, at twitch.tv/Evolved Male. And a shout out to everyone in the Twitch chat. Thanks for joining us. And Asuna. Yay.
All right, Luna?
Yeah.
Well, first I want to say a big thank you to both Ethys and Moose for being here tonight. I have the biggest lore boner right now.
Yeah, I was about to say, did we
idea.
actually answer all your questions here?
I want to pick up my lore book now and just read every single little section there is. I want more.
You probably raised more questions than you answered, but that's good.
No, they answered a lot of my questions, how everyone fits into the Shadows of Mhach kind of and whatnot. That's where my mind was. Why are these people here? What are they doing here? What is their connection to the Void Ark and everything around us?
I don't know, but for every one question that was answered for me, two more popped up, so that just kind of made my head.
Need another.
Well,
maybe we just need another lore extravaganza.
We will definitely
not going
together.
dark yet.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt you, Luna. Continue.
Big shout out to the people I was running my second relic light farm on. I know things got kind of weird and amazing and fun, but that's a part of grinding, is losing your mind a little bit. Other than that, yeah, right. Other than that, just a big shout out to everyone giving us a look, giving us a listen. We appreciate every one of you, and we love every one of you. We wouldn't be here without you guys.
Definitely.
Definitely. Last out, like, just not really a shout out, but I can't wait to see you guys at the next fan. For sure. We will have to get a drink. We will have to do something.
Hear, hear.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yay.
Seyrr?
All right. Also, big thank you to Ethys and to Moose. This was really fun. Like, I'm trying to think of all the things I want to say. I keep starting to have something halfway formulated, and then it's like, no, that's too cheesy, or that doesn't quite say enough. But just everyone who participates in these kind of lore discussions, it's this really big, awesome collaborative storytelling. And I'm just really into storytelling as this way that people share ideas, share feelings, really connect with each other. And so all the work that you put into this, you two and everyone else who participates in these lore discussions, in building out this big shared world, it's this thing where people get to connect to each other in this really fun way. I love seeing that in all sorts of endeavors, and it's one of the things that really keeps me playing this game. So this was just a really wonderful evening for you, just getting to cut loose and talk about and speculate and bounce ideas back and forth. Like, oh man, I was still feeling a little bit under the weather from being sick earlier, but I had not felt this good in quite a while. This is a great feeling. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right.
Group hug.
The feels, man.
Yeah,
No,
I'm a hugger.
and,
He is. He's not lying.
No, definitely. And I also want to echo those sentiments. Thank you, Ethys and Moose, for joining us. Like I said, this has been a dream since FanFest, since the lore book was announced, and being able to do this now just before Stormblood, it's like I said, it's a dream come true. Thank you so much for, making this one of our most popular live streams, definitely, and hope it's going to be one of our most downloaded podcasts as well. Shout out to my co-hosts, Chili, Luna, and Seyrr, because you guys do an awesome job. Like I said, I can't do this without you guys, so thank you very much.
Don't worry. Me sitting here eating this Biscoff cookie butter was really hard work.
Well,
I'm glad I can carry the team on my back.
You were the catalyst that got this thing going. So, don't discount your role in this one, Luna. You were
Biscoff cookie butter was delicious, by the way.
But both in terms of just like, hey, seeing AnonyMoose and getting that talk going, but also in terms of, hey, I have a question. There's something I can't understand. Like, that's the basic, I want a story. I want to understand why this works. Stories are a big way of how we explain the world around us. There's so much information that we convey through stories. So when you're asking questions like that, you're asking people to tell stories, and that's how this kind of thing gets started.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And
Seyrr, half the conversations I begin with you is like, Seyrr, how did this thing happen? Tell me.
She's not lying.
I'm not.
She's not.
That is almost always a really fun question to answer.
I want to throw
I
want to throw another huge shout out to everybody out on Twitch. We hit over 300 follows now tonight because of this. So thank you everybody for that.
Congratulations.
You guys are the best.
Yeah, it's an amazing feeling to hit that 300 mark. We had so many new follows today. If you look at that list on there, I swear to God, we have to be close to over 10 new ones just today. So
Nice.
that's sweet. It's one step closer to that partnership, hopefully, but we'll take them as they go. And thank you to everybody who listens to us on a regular basis. If you want to reach Chili on Twitter, he is at Chili_UK, or is it just Chili UK? I don't remember.
Just to the UK.
Just Chili UK. It must be old. I didn't get updated. Luna is at Luna_Vox. Seyrr can be found at FFXIV Seyrr with 2 R's. And you can follow me at PHXDN_Klaus with 2 S's. So, for our guests, Ethys and AnonyMoose, for Chili, for Luna, and for Seyrr, I am Klaus Nightbringer, wishing everybody a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for joining us, and look forward to more of these in the future. Take care.
Phoenix Down Radio is a production of PhoenixDownRadio.com and Illusion Productions. Final Fantasy XIV and Eorzea are trademarks of Square Enix. In-game content for Phoenix Down Radio is the copyright of Square Enix. Opening music for Phoenix Down Radio is provided by Guilty Gear Rock You. Check out the Metal Chocobo theme cover and many other music videos at youtube.com/guiltygearrockyou. Closing music for this episode is provided by Guitar Wanker 90. Please check out their full version of Matoya's Cave and other rock video game covers at youtube.com/guitarwanker 90. The views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of Phoenix Down Radio and its hosts and do not reflect the views of Square Enix.